We begin the ninth perek on Daf Samach Dalid with an introduction based on Parshas Matos, Bamidbar Lamed Ishki Dar Neder Lo Yachel Dvaro, and the Gemara in Chagiga Daf Yud, and also the Sifri Lo Yaseh Dvarav Chulin, and the Gemara darshins Lo Yachel Dvaro Hu Eino Mochel. He himself cannot make his words chulin, aval acherim mochlim lo. So if a person has charata and he regrets the fact that he took a neder, then he comes in front of a chacham or in front of three hedyotos, and they look for a Pesach. And they look for something that if he would have known about it at the time of his neder, he never would have taken the neder. And that's called hataras chacham. Now, if, let's say, there is no Pesach, the Chachamim themselves, the Chacham or the Bezdin, they will try to evoke a response from the Noder and try to get him to agree that this, whatever it is the Chacham says, should serve as a Pesach. And the idea of Pesach is identical with the idea of Tos. Pesach and Tos mean the same thing, basically. In fact, according to the Shita of the Marit from 6 centuries ago, he holds that in a case of Tos, you don't need Hataras Chacham, and in the case of Pesach, you don't really need Hataras Chacham. It's only a rabbinic requirement. But be that as it may, the idea and the goal is to get the Noder to admit that he made a mistake. He's now confessing that if he would have originally at the time of the neder known X, Y, or Z, he never would have taken the neder. And the Mishnah records a machlokus between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, if a person comes in front of a Chacham to be shol on his neder, he has no Pesach. He can't say, well, if I would have known X, I wouldn't have taken the neder. Poschid li Adam, the Chacham or the Bezdin will find a reason to judge this neder as a neder sheish bo Pesach, b'chvod aviv v'imo. What does this mean, b'chvod aviv v'imo? The Chacham is going to ask the noder, do you realize, or at the time of the neder, did you realize that your neder is memaye, it limits the glory, the kavod, the honor of your parents? Why? Perhaps you forgot to remind yourself of the concept that we presented here at the beginning of Masechet Nedarim on Daf Tes, that if a person is flippant, he's parutz, the Nedarim, he's called a rasha. And therefore you have caused a bizayon to your parents. And if the noder at that point responds that I didn't think about that, and now I regret that I took the neder, which caused a bizayon to my parents because haparetz b'nedarim nikra rasha, therefore I would not have taken the neder. And that's enough, says Rabbi Eliezer, to create a Pesach and for the Chacham to be marked with the neder. The Chachamim osrim. The Chachamim disagree, and they will not allow the Chacham to be poseach with a Pesach of kavod over the imo. And the question is, why not? We're going to explain this shita, the Chachamim, based on Abaye, which we'll learn in the Gemara. Now, the Tosas Yontif points out that although Rava disagrees with the interpretation of Abaye, and we paskin like Rava against Abaye, nevertheless, with regard to Tam, when we're looking just for the reasoning for a halacha, and Abaye and Rava give two different reasons, then we can be open to the question which reason is more compelling or more logical. And in this particular case, we're going to interpret, says the Tosas Yontif, our Mishnah, based on Abaye against Rava, because Abaye's Tam, Nira Yosef Mistaber, seems more logical to us. What does Abai say? Abai says the following in explaining the Chachamim's objection and hesitation to be poseh b'chod aviv, because the underlying premise of this Pesach is that the man was parts b'nedarim, and therefore he's called a Rasha. If he's a Rasha, then you know what? When Beis Din calls him in and says to him, well, would you have taken the neder if you knew what a bizayon you are to your parents? Then a Rasha of this sort, whose parts b'nedarim, is not going to be meiz panav. He's not going to have the chutzpah in front of Beis Din to really admit the truth that he couldn't care less about kvod horov. He's a no there. He's parts b'nedarim. He's going to say to the chacham, yeah, you know what? I have charot on my neder, and in truth, that charot is only min hasafa ulechutz. It's only what he's saying because he doesn't want to be meiz panav in front of the rabbi and say, oh, I couldn't care less about my parents. So really, he doesn't have what you call charata b'leiv. Charata has to be a sincere charata. And you're going to go ahead, says Abaye in interpreting the Chachamim, and you're going to be matir the neder without charata, because there really is no charata. So that's the interpretation of the Chachamim arguing against Rabbi Eliezer according to Abaye. The Mishnah now continues in the name of Rabbi Tzadok to explain Rabbi Eliezer's shita, and says the following: to the same extent that according to Rabbi Eliezer, you could be poseach, find the Pesach for the neder. The Chacham could initiate the process of finding a Pesach based on kvod of the imo. So too, according to the shita Rabbi Eliezer, poschin lo b'kvod hamokom. The Chacham will say to the noder, look, you are memayit b'kvod hamokom. And if you would have been aware of the fact that when you took the neder, that you're being mekil b'chvodo shel makom, would you have taken the neder? And he says, no, I wouldn't have taken the neder. We can be matir the neder based on poschin b'chvod hamokom. When we interrogate him and we ask him, do you realize that by taking the neder, you were mekil b'chvodo shel makom? Now, to explain this phrase of mekil b'chvodo shel makom, we quote the Rambam in his Pirush HaMishnayos. He writes the following: Hadover yadua shakadosh baruch hu eino chafetz b'nedarim b'kas. That people who are very angry by nature, and they get angry from frequently, they will take nedarim. That's their response in a state of anger, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu is not happy with that. And therefore, when a person takes a neder, yesh lanu lomar, says the Rambam, shakadosh Baruch Hu moes bakas shehevio lidei neder. So that's Rabbi Tzadok, based on the Rambam in Pirush HaMishnayos. Amru lo. The Chachamim respond to Rabbi Tzadok. If you're correct that according to Rabbi Eliezer's shita, it's enough to be poseach b'chvod hamokom, im kein ein nedarim. What does that mean? Ein nedarim. What is the accusation here that the Chachamim are leveling against Rabbi Tzadok? Ein nedarim. So we can interpret this Mishnah according to the Ran. The Chachamim certainly are of the opinion that ein poschin b'chvod aviv v'imo v'lo b'chvod hamokom, but they're responding to Rabbi Tzadok that even though Rabbi Eliezer holds that poschin b'chvod aviv v'imo, he would concede in the case of kvod hamokom that we have a chash that he's lying to us and he doesn't really have belibo charata. This is not an appropriate Pesach. Notice the Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Eliezer even as far as poschin b'chvod aviv v'imo. because we're afraid that Ein Adam Meis Panov, and he really doesn't have a true, genuine charot. He's just lying to Bezdin. But even within the context of the Shita Rabbi Eliezer, say that argue the Chachamim, we should differentiate between Poschim B'chod Ovid Ve'imo and the case of Poschim B'chod Amokom. Why? Because even if Rabbi Eliezer would hold that Adam Meiz Panav Lomar She'eino Choshesh L'chvod Horov, that a person would have no compulsions about saying, I don't care about Kvod Aviv or Kvod Imo, and therefore we assume that Adam Meiz, and therefore he's being sincere when he says he wouldn't have taken the neder. That's Rabbi Eliezer Shita. But Ein Shum Adam Meiz, no one would have the chutzpah in front of a chacham or in front of a bezdin to be making with kvod hamakom. So for sure, Rabbi Eliezer would concede to our position, that of the chachamim, that he will certainly have no inhibitions about lying in front of the chacham because he doesn't want to be meiz pana on something like kvod hamakom. I mean, that would be almost a confession that he's a total Russia. And he couldn't care less about Kvod HaMakom. That he's not going to say. He's not going to admit that. And you'll end up with a charata that's not really a genuine, true charata. And therefore, even Rabbi Eliezer would admit that Ein Poskim B'Kvod HaMakom. Okay, fine. Now we're going to flip it to the other side of the coin. Are there situations in which even the Chachamim would concede that although Ein Poskim B'Kvod Aviv Ve'imo, there are situations where we could introduce the element of Kvod Aviv Ve'imo, and we could evoke a genuine charata. Modim Chacham Rabbi Eliezer, B'davar shebeino levein Aviv Ve'imo, if the neder itself was directed towards Aviv Ve'imo. For example, a person prohibited his parents from getting any benefit, from getting any hana from him, then even the Chachamim agree in this case that Poskim lo b'chod Aviv Ve'imo. And why is this so? And here, the Ran quotes the Yushalmi, and I'm going to give you a summary of the Ran in the name of the Yushalmi. Kevan sheroim she'ein kvodam chomer b'einov. It's obvious from the neder itself, the content of the neder, not because a part's been in Nedarim is called a Russia, and that's a bizayon to his parents. No, because of the very substance of the neder, it's clear that ein kvodam chomer b'einov. He already was a chutz b'nyah when he took this neder to prohibit his parents from getting any hana from him. That is a terrible pigia in the kvod Aviv Ve'imo. So obviously, kvod Aviv Ve'imo is not on his radar screen. It's not chomer b'einov. He's already a chutzpahdik by the very essence of his neder against his parents. And therefore, once again, he has no problem being meiz pana. If the Chacham says that, don't you care about kvod Aviv Ve'imo? He has no problem. He has no ambitions about telling him I couldn't care less. That was the very neder that he took. He's already anti his parents. So therefore, according to the Yushalmi, ein chosheshin shein shaker b'fnei bezdin. We're not afraid that when he says, you know what, maybe I shouldn't have taken that neder. Maybe I regret that I took the neder. Had I known how much I'm being mamayit in kvod Aviv Ve'imo, I never would have taken the neder. We can trust him on that. We can rely on him that he's telling the truth, that we're not choshesh b'sheker, because he's already established himself as a chatziv panav keneged Aviv Ve'imo. So he could have easily and comfortably said, you know what, I would have taken the neder in any event. And you're not convincing me that I should have regret about the neder. And since he could have been comfortable about that, he's already broken the ice and created a pattern and a precedent of chatziv panav keneged Aviv Ve'imo. Therefore, if he says, you know what, I have second thoughts, and you're convincing me that this is an Avera Chamura on my part. I shouldn't have been Pogeh B'chodov the evil. We can trust him, and even the Chacham would agree that Poskim B'chodov Vimo, when the substance of the neder itself was a Pagia in Chodov Vimu Osarol of Vimo Lehenos Mimen. Now we go back to Rabbi Eliezer, and we saw that Rabbi Eliezer was Mekil in Dine Nedarim. Here's another kula of Rabbi Eliezer, Poschim B'nolai. In a Pesach, what we do is we say, look, were you aware at the time of your neder of X, Y, or Z? Rabbi Eliezer goes a step further. Even if X, Y, or Z did not exist in the world at the time that he took the neder, which means it's basically impossible to achieve a Pesach, because at the time of the neder it was a davar shelo bali olam, a dayin lo bali olam. It was no longer achar shenadar. Nevertheless, Rabbi Eliezer expands the scope of Pesach to include even a case of Noah, the Chachamim Osrim. Chachamim say you can't make a Pesach out of something that comes up in reality after his neder and it wasn't there at the time of his neder. Pesach means, well, did you take into consideration this fact that was in existence at the time that he took the neder? Maybe you didn't pay attention to it. And then the Noder says to the Chacham, if I would have paid attention to it, I wouldn't have taken the neder. So we're going back to the moment of the neder. It's like going back in the time machine. And that's called Nidrei Tovs. But say the Chacham, in the case of Noad, you can't say, well, if he would have known. What do you mean if he would have known? It was Noad. It didn't even exist at that time. So let's say, for example, as we'll soon see in the Mishnah, a person took a neder against, prohibiting Anof from a regular ordinary Jew, and then that ordinary Jew later on at some point was Ola Ligdula. Nobody would have anticipated and nobody could have guessed and foreseen that this person would become so important that now the Noder needs benefits from that person. That's Nola. Because at the time of the Neder, the Noder was aware of everything he had to be aware of. A new situation arose in the continuation of time post the Shas Neder. The Chachamim say that's not a Pesach. Pesach has to tell me that he was unaware of X at the time that he took the Neder. Ketzad Omar, he says, Kodom Shani Neder Li'ish Ploni. I'm not going to benefit from so and so. I take it upon myself as an Isa Kodom, an Isa Karmon, that I won't have any benefit from someone. Vinasa, and that person, Li'achar Zman, became a sofer. Now here we have a machlokas rishonim. What does the word sofer mean in this Mishnah? According to the Ran, we'll see it later on in the Ran, the word sofer means a Talmud Chacham. A Talmud Chacham is a Mora Hora, and now I need this Talmud Chacham to answer my questions. And I want to benefit from him because he's a Talmud Chacham. According to the other Rishonim, Tosorosh and others, the Mefaresh, sofer is a lavla. He's a scribe. And the scribe was not only in charge of writing Sifrei Torah, etc., but he was also in charge of writing shtaros for the Bnei Ha'ir. And everybody has occasion in which he needs a document, like a power of attorney or whatever it might be. And now the Noder realizes, I need this guy desperately. I need him to write my shtar. He is the sofer of the city. Oh, another example the Mishnah gives. Shahaya Masiyas Bino. In those days, they lived in smaller communities. And if somebody married off his son, he would make a big party, a big banquet, a Sudas Nisuin, and every member of the community would join in the Sudas Nisuin. And now, unforeseen by the Noder, when he took his Neder, this person that he prohibited getting Hana from is now inviting him. He gets an invitation in the mail to the Sudas Nisuin of his son, V'Omar. And the Noder declares in front of the Bezdin, Ilu Ayisi Odea, Shehunas is Sofer Shemasi is Pita Makaro. If I would have known that any day now he's becoming a Sofer, he's taking a course in Safos, or he's learning in yeshiva, steiging away Yom Malayla, or he's marrying off his son, lo yisi nodeh. I never would have taken the neder. This is called Poschin Binola. This is the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer. We have now in the Mishnah two different kulos of Rabbi Eliezer. Number one, we could be Poseach L'chvod of the Imo. Had you known that this would cause a bizoyin to your parents, would you have taken the neder? And according to Rabbi Tzadok, even in the case of Poschin B'foda Makom, do you realize that it was against the will of God that out of anger you took a neder? And now we have a second kula of Rabbi Eliezer, so that even if a situation arises after, subsequent, post his neder, we could use that situation as a pesach. Another example of nolad, konam l'bayis zeh shani nichnas. I took upon myself a carbon, an Eastern konam, that I won't go into this house. V'nasa beis hakneses. And the local community, the Tuvei Ha'ir, purchased this building, this structure, and they made it into a Beis HaKnesses. The Amar, now the note declares, Ilu Yisi Odeshu Nase, Beis HaKnesses, if I would have only known that with the passage of time, this bias would be designated as a Beis HaKnesses, this is the local shul of the city, Lo Yisi no there. I wouldn't have taken the neder because now I don't have the possibility of davening and entering into the Beis HaKnesses. If Rabbi Eliezer Mati, Rabbi Eliezer says you can be poseach b'nolan. The Chachamim osrim. The Chachamim say that's not called a Pesach. A Pesach means that the situation had arose at the time of the neder. He was not focused on it. Had he been focused on that mitzius that existed at the time of the neder, he never would have taken the neder. Now the Gemara asks the question, what does it mean, Imkain, if Rabbi Tzadok, you are correct in your expansion of Rabbi Eliezer, that even in the case of Kvod HaMakom, we could set up a Pesach, Ein Nedarim. What does that mean, Ein Nedarim? So now we get into the machlokas that we hinted about between Abaye and Rav. Amar Abaye, Imkain, if you could be poseach with a Pesach of you were mamayit b'kvod HaMakom, ein nedarim nitarim yafa. We don't really trust him. He doesn't want to be meiz panov and say to the chacham, yeah, I don't care about kvod HaMakom, I would have taken the neder anyway. He's going to lie. He's going to say, well, when I took the neder, it didn't enter into my mind that I was being mamayit b'kvod HaMakom. So his charata is just bepiv. It's only words. It's only menasafa l'chutz. Belibo, there's no Pesach. He never really had charata. There's no genuine charata. And now you're going to be mater nedarim without charata. That's how we interpret the Mishnah based on Abaye.